Hello everyone, and thank you for coming to listen to my talk. My name is Sian Green, and I'm a PhD student at Durham University, where I also work with the citizen science project Mammalweb, which involves members of the public in helping to monitor our wild mammal populations using camera traps. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about a comparison between using either video footage or photo footage, and which might be better to use in a citizen science project. So camera traps, not everyone might know what they are, so just a brief explanation. They are remotely activated cameras that are triggered when an animal moves in front of them. This works because they sense surface area temperatures. So animals tend to have a different surface temperature to the background, so maybe a rock or a tree. So when an animal moves in front of the camera, it detects this difference and is triggered. Once it is triggered, it can either take a photo, a series of photos in a quick-fire burst, or a video, or some models can take photos and then a video in a sequence. So what do we use camera traps for? They're really good for long-term monitoring and for detecting elusive species that are difficult to see. This is because we can leave them in place for long periods of time. So this increases our chances of catching species that don't come by very often. And because we don't have to be there in person, species that might deliberately avoid humans might be easier to catch on camera trap as well. They're great for studying animal behaviour because they record quite natural behaviours in the wild, because again there's less disturbance because there's not people around. And they can provide really nice footage for use in outreach and education, so you get nice views, nice photos and videos of animals in natural settings. And they're really good for combining with citizen science because they tend to collect a lot of data, so a lot of photos and a lot of videos. But this is something that members of the public can help with because they can sort through the footage, which can be quite an enjoyable task as well, because you've got to see lots of nice footage of animals that you wouldn't normally get to see. And camera traps are also good fun. A lot of people use them recreationally as well as just for research. You know, if you're curious what's in your garden or your local patch, they can reveal some really interesting things about the wildlife near you. So camera traps can be set up in quite a lot of different ways, especially modern cameras. We have quite a lot of settings to choose from. In particular, I'm interested in comparing photo settings to video settings. Does that make a difference in terms of the data we collect? Is one better than the other, depending on what situation you're in? So I decided to test this by rigging two camera traps together. They're exactly the same, apart from one is taking photos and one is taking videos. And I set camera traps in pairs like this all around the Forest of Dean to see what we would catch and if there's any difference in the data sets. So I went through a lot of the footage myself, and in terms of ecological recording, the photo and the video cameras captured essentially exactly the same thing. So this is useful to know in terms of a project. You know, we don't have to worry that we're going to miss things if we use video or photo, and we can combine data sets knowing that ecologically they're going to be the same. And these graphs here just show activity patterns for different species. So for an activity pattern, it's important to get all the detections to show when species are active, and the lines overlap a lot because the photo and video were essentially collecting the same data, which is good. So ecologically the same, but do people find it easier to classify videos or photos? And is there a general preference amongst members of the public for one over the other? To find this out, I uploaded both videos and photos to projects on MammalWeb, which is our citizen science website. So I made two projects that were exactly the same, other than one contained photos to be classified and one contained videos. When you're classifying on MammalWeb, this is the kind of screen that our spotters or classifiers would see. So you'd see, the either photo, series of photos, or a short video, and then you select from the list on the right which species you think it is. You can toggle between photos if there's more than one in the sequence, and you can also like a photo with a little thumbs up, just as kind of the same way that you might like something on Facebook, just as a bit of fun, really. So I then compared the classifications that we got from MammalWeb with my own classifications, to see how well people on MammalWeb were identifying the species. Overall, we found that classification accuracy was higher in videos, even if it was only a short video, so maybe only 5 seconds long. They were still more accurate than when we used a sequence of photos. So we have 3 versions of photo sequence. So it's 1 photo in a sequence, 3 photos in a sequence, or 8 photos in a sequence. We expected an increase in accuracy with more photos in a sequence, just because you've got more images to look at. You might be able to spot movement, and you're more likely, just by chance, to have that good angle to help identify a species. This was the case for some animals. So in particular, small rodents, so things like mice, were more easily identified when you had more photos. And again, we see they're quite a bit more easily identifiable in videos. And that's probably because we can see movement, which helps us spot things that are so small. Some of the larger species, we see a difference, though it's not so great. So things like wild boar and fallow deer, they're quite large animals, so they're quite easily recognizable, even if you've only got, 1 photo a lot of the time. We have one slightly strange data point on roe deer, where the 5-second videos were identified with quite a low level of accuracy. This is possibly because roe deer are not common, or not as common in the Forest of Dean. So it could be that if you'd done a lot of classifying, you'd seen a lot of fallow deer, and you just saw a really short video, and you weren't exactly sure what it was, you'd maybe be more likely to guess, fallow deer rather than roe deer, and then get that wrong. Also, because we had a low number of videos of roe deer, when you've got smaller numbers, it's more easily skewed. The data is more easily skewed by having like a few weird videos. So it might have just happened by chance that we've got, a few short videos of roe deer that are particularly difficult to identify. But overall, we're seeing quite a high level of accuracy for videos. When people are classifying, we also give the option of adding a little bit more information if they can. This is entirely optional. So people can choose to identify whether they think the animal in the photo or video is an adult or a juvenile. And we tend to find that this information isn't added a lot previously on MammalWeb. However, when we started introducing the videos, people seem much more likely to supply that extra information, possibly because they're more confident in their answer, having watched, a video and seen more of that species. Or it could be an indication that people are just engaging with the footage a little bit more. It takes time to watch a video, so it could be that they've invested more time in it, so they think, oh, I'm gonna, get the most information I can out of this footage. And again, we see differences between the species. So people are more likely to supply this information, particularly for deer, it seems. And this could be because people think it's quite clear when you have a juvenile and an adult deer, because you get those differences in coat pattern as well. People were not very likely to try and identify a wild boar as an adult or juvenile. This could be because people are less familiar with wild boar in general, as they're not present in many places across the UK, and have only relatively recently, become established again in the Forest of Dean. So people just might not be confident in deciding what's an adult or a juvenile, particularly as we don't really give any guidance. It's up to participants to decide what they would class as a juvenile. So this is just to illustrate that. So we've got an adult and a juvenile fox here. The fox has slightly different sort of proportions as a juvenile, but essentially is a bit of a mini-me of the adult. Whereas with the juvenile roe deer that we see on the bottom, they have that quite a distinctive spotted coat pattern that clearly marks it as a juvenile, and then once it comes into its adult coat, that would kind of be an obvious distinguishing kind of line to draw between an adult and a juvenile. Again, here are some juvenile wild boar, if anyone hasn't seen any before. When they're very young, so sort of like piglets, they're called humbugs, because they have this striped coat pattern that makes them camouflage very well. However, when they kind of get to an adolescent stage, they're still a bit smaller than an adult, but they have just that kind of plain dark coat, so it would be harder to tell at that stage which to classify them as. So here is a group that I would consider to be adults, even though some of them might well be young from that year. They've just grown out of their baby coats. As well as classifying adult or juvenile, people have the option of classifying male or female. So for this, I just narrowed down the categories to just look at the deer species, as these are the ones I would really expect people to identify as male or female, as the males and females do look different. And again, we don't see as big of a difference, but again, people were more likely to identify them as a male or a female, so to have a go at sexing the animal if it was in a video compared to a photo. So one of the reasons people might be supplying this additional information is because they're taking longer to classify the videos, or it could be the other way around, that people are taking longer to classify videos because they're trying to supply this extra information. So on average, people would classify a single photo if it came up within 34 seconds. If there was 3 photos in a sequence, 2 seconds longer, they would take 36 seconds. And if there were 8 photos in the sequence to go through all of them, just a couple more seconds on that. However, even when the video was only 5 seconds long, people tended to take almost a minute to classify it. And that was a similar time for 10-second videos as well. And then if it was a 20-second video, they would take a little bit longer. So this is kind of indicating that people are watching these videos multiple times. So this might be helping, what's helping to ensure that higher level of accuracy, because people are going through it several times, and being able to extract that extra information. So people tend to be better at classifying videos, but do they enjoy it as much, or do they prefer one over the other? So I looked at the number of users that have taken part in a session of classification. So for this, I defined a session as having classified at least 3 photo sequences in a row, or 3 videos in a row, to make it a session rather than just a one-off. We had a higher number of users participate in the photo session compared to videos. However, there was some overlap, so some people participated in both. However, quite a lot of people chose one project and just stuck to it. So for example, 66 people participated only in the photo project and not in the video project. And then 57 people chose to do sessions from the video project but didn't participate in the photo project at all. So to me, this is kind of just indicating that, there's not necessarily one that's better than the other, but people just have a personal preference. So it could be that, having 2 options is good, because people prefer different things, and we can give choices. People can do the one that they prefer. We had, so overall, because we had a few more participants in the photo project, we have slightly greater number of classification sessions compared to video. And when people did participate in one of these sessions, the mean amount of time that they would spend classifying based on when they first submitted a classification to the time when they submitted their last one in that session was about just over 26 minutes for the photo project and about 27 minutes for the video project on average, which is obviously a very similar amount of time. So it's perhaps that's just kind of the amount of time people usually have for classification or participating in this kind of project. On average, people submitted 42 classifications when they were doing the photo project and classified 33 videos per session on the video project. So again, the video is slightly small, is a slightly lower number, which is not surprising considering they're spending a similar amount of time, but we know it takes longer per video to classify. So this is just a couple of figures that show that information as well, because we can see there are a lot of outliers. So if we look at session duration, again, sort of half an hour per session is average, but we do get some people that spend a very long time on a session, so up to a couple of hours where they're sat doing classifying, which is incredible. And again, when we look at the number classified, that reflects a similar situation. So, you know, on average, you might be sort of classifying 20 to 30 per session, but then you get those outliers where people have spent a really long time and submitted, you know, a couple of hundred classifications. So I've also decided to have a look at our likes button to see whether that indicates sort of a preference for photo or video. Historically, the like button has not been used an awful lot on MammalWeb as a whole project. However, we can see the proportion of videos of each species that are liked are a lot higher for the videos. So again, we tend to see like some species are just preferred compared to others. But for pretty much everything we see, again, people are liking the videos much more than they're liking the photos. This is kind of showing roe deer to be quite popular. So out of, you know, even though there was not as many videos of roe deer, quite a high proportion of those were liked. And again, it could be because they're less common within the project. So it's more exciting when one comes up because you haven't seen one in a while. So perhaps that makes them more likely to be liked. Yeah, muntjac also seem quite popular, as well as red foxes. People tend to like those as well. So a second part of this project has been focusing specifically on pine martens, which have recently been reintroduced to the Forest of Dean, and we're trying to monitor the population as it grows. So each pine marten actually has a uniquely marked bib pattern, so it's like a sort of pale creamy fur underneath the chin and across the chest. For some we have diagrams showing the way that it's like marked, and we can use this with camera trap footage to try and match up which pine marten is which. So for example, here we can see a bib diagram and it's actually of the pine marten on the left, as we can just about see the edge of that sort of heart-shaped patch of dark fur that's shown on the bib on the pine marten that's climbing up on the stump there. It's quite difficult, but once you get your eye in, it's quite good fun. So in a similar way, I have photo and video projects on MammalWeb with footage of pine martens on. And we're sort of seeing a slightly similar pattern in that more people so far have participated in the photo project and therefore submitted a slightly higher number of classifications. Out of those classifications, a similar number have been of pine martens, which is what we would expect, because again, we're using those paired cameras, so we'd expect a similar number of events of that are capturing pine martens as opposed to non-target species in this survey. And so once you've identified the pine marten, we've asked people to try and individually identify them, which is very tricky. However, people seem to be at least trying to identify footage on the video project at quite a higher rate compared to the photo project. So for 43% of the pine marten footage that we currently have, people have tried to identify it to an individual level, whereas there's 10% less for the photo project. So again, it might seem quite low, but it is quite tricky, and there are a lot of pine marten footage where it's just sort of running away and you can't see the bib properly. So we've added some new footage again recently, hopefully with some better camera angles to see how that goes. But overall, it seems like it might be easier to do from video compared to photo so far. So my personal take, having had to do quite a lot of classifying of photos and videos myself, is that long videos can be quite time consuming to classify. They can get quite repetitive when you've got quite a lot of videos of a squirrel running up and down the same tree or something like that. Whereas you can get quite nice photos as well. They can be quite quick to sort, and in some ways they may be more practical if all you want is a quick species record. However, when you do get a nice video, it can be really engaging, it can be really exciting, you can see really interesting behaviours, they are really fun, and they can provide us with more ecological information sometimes. So for example, trying to ID to individual level or showing particular behaviours. And for citizen science projects, I think it's really important to allow for personal choice or personal preference, as we're trying to engage as many people as possible to get involved in the project. So if we can have that flexibility and allow both photos and videos, then for me, I think that's a really good thing. But I would be really interested to hear if anyone else had any opinions on this. So I've looked at the classifications that people have submitted on MammalWeb, and I've tried to interpret them as to why people might enjoy photos or videos. But obviously, if people have got thoughts, opinions, comments, anything like that, please leave them below or get in touch with us, as I would be really interested to hear what you guys think. And if you would like to find out more or get in touch with us or have a go at any of these projects, you can visit our website, www.mammalweb.org. You can contact us via email, or you can follow us on our social media accounts. We are on Instagram, Twitter, and on Facebook. So yeah, thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. Bye.